Welcome back to the Finance and Operations UDE tutorial series. In part 1, we built a continuous integration build pipeline that produces a deployable Power Platform unified package on every commit. In this episode, we take that package and walk through building the release pipeline that deploys it. We will set up a service connection from Azure DevOps to a Power Platform environment, link the build artifact, configure the 3 deployment tasks that Microsoft documents as the standard pattern for finance and operations, set up the environment variable they share, and add staged deployments with manual approval gates between them. This is the second half of the build and deploy story for finance and operations on a unified developer environment. Let's get started. Before we touch the release pipeline, we need a service connection. A service connection is how Azure DevOps authenticates against a target Power Platform environment. Microsoft documents 2 authentication methods for Power Platform service connections. The first is username and password, which does not support multi-factor authentication and is not recommended. The second is service principal with client secret, which does support multi-factor authentication. We are using service principal. To create the service connection, navigate to Project Settings, then Pipelines, then Service Connections. Click New Service Connection and pick Power Platform from the connection type picker. The configuration form needs 4 pieces of information. The server URL is the Dataverse environment URL in the format https:// environment name .crm-region.dynamics.com. The tenant ID is the Microsoft Entra tenant identifier. The application ID is the client ID of the Microsoft Entra application you registered for this purpose, and the client secret is the secret value you generated against that application. Microsoft documents the prerequisites for this setup in detail. You must register a Microsoft Entra application, add that application as an application user inside your Power Platform environment, and grant it the system administrator security role on that environment. The official reference is the Power Platform Programmability Authentication article on Microsoft Learn. Without those steps, the authentication will succeed, but the deployment will fail with a permissions error. We give the connection a meaningful name, in our case Contoso-D365-dev, and tick grant access permission to all pipelines. With the service connection ready, we move to pipelines, then releases. This is the classic release pipelines area of Azure DevOps. It is a different user interface from the pipelines section we used in part 1. Click New Pipeline, and from the template gallery pick Empty Job. You land on the release pipeline editor. The canvas has 2 main lanes. On the left is the artifacts lane, where we link the package produced by the build pipeline. On the right is the stages lane, where we configure deployment targets. We use one stage to start, which we rename to deploy to UDE using the stage name field in the right panel. To link the artifact, click Add next to artifacts. From the source type picker, pick Build. The project field defaults to your current project. In the source build pipeline dropdown, pick the build pipeline from part 1, which in our case is Contoso-D365-CI. Leave default version as latest and the source alias as build. Click Add. The canvas now shows the build pipeline as the artifact source, connected by a solid line to the deploy to UDE stage. Click the 1 job, 0 task link on the deploy to UDE stage to go inside the stage. You see an agent job. Click the plus icon to add tasks. We will add 3 tasks from the Power Platform Build Tools extension, in this specific order. The Power Platform Build Tools extension is a free Microsoft published extension on the Visual Studio Marketplace, and Microsoft's official documentation lists it as the recommended approach for automating Power Platform deployments from Azure DevOps. The first task is Power Platform Tool Installer. Microsoft's documentation states, and I quote, that this task is required to be added once before any other Power Platform Build Tools tasks in build and release pipelines. It installs a set of Power Platform specific tools required by the agent to run the deployment tasks, including the Power Platform command line interface. The task needs no configuration, just add it. The second task is Power Platform WhoAmI. Microsoft documents this task as one that verifies a Power Platform environment service connection by connecting and making a WhoAmI request. It is not a deployment task, it is a connectivity test, and Microsoft's documentation explicitly recommends including it early in the pipeline to verify connectivity before processing begins. For authentication type, select Service Principal/Client Secret. For service connection, select the connection we created in section 1. The environment URL field defaults to the variable buildtools.environment URL. We will define that variable in a moment. If the service connection or the application user permissions are misconfigured, the WhoAmI task fails in around 5 seconds with a clear error message. Without this task, the same misconfigurations only surface 20 minutes into a real deployment. The third task is Power Platform Deploy Package. This is the task that does the actual deployment. Authentication type and service connection are the same as the WhoAmI task. Environment URL again defaults to the buildtools.environment URL variable. The package file field needs careful attention. The path points at the unified package file produced by the build pipeline. The full path is $open bracket system.default working directory close bracket /build/drop /cloud deployable package /TemplatePackage.dll. Let me break that down. System.default working directory is an Azure DevOps predefined variable pointing at the agent's working folder. Build is the source alias we set when we link the artifact. Drop is the artifact folder name published by the build pipeline. Cloud deployable package is the folder containing the Power Platform unified package format, which Microsoft introduced specifically for unified environment deployments. And TemplatePackage.dll is the unified package manifest. If you change the source alias from build to anything else, you must update this path to match. Maximum wait time is set to 60 minutes in this demo. This is the polling timeout for the deployment task itself. Microsoft's official tutorial for setting up a release pipeline for finance and operations notes that finance and operations deployments to a unified environment typically take over an hour to complete, and recommends setting the agent job timeout, which is a separate setting at the job level, to at least 180 minutes. Microsoft also recommends using self-hosted Windows agents rather than Microsoft-hosted agents for production deployments, because the Power Platform Deploy Package task requires a Windows agent and Microsoft-hosted agents have default job timeouts that may not be sufficient for large deployments. Leave output log to console checked. This pipes the deployment logs directly into the Azure DevOps run output, which is the only practical way to debug a failed deployment. Switch to the Variables tab at the top. We need to add the variable that the 3 deployment tasks share. Click Add and enter the following. Name buildtools.environment URL. This name matters. It is the convention every task in the Power Platform Build Tools extension expects. When set, it is automatically consumed by subsequent tasks as their default target environment. Get the casing right. Value the Power Platform environment URL of your target environment. For our demo, https://contoso-dev.crm11.dynamics.com. Scope Release. This applies the value across all stages of the pipeline. In a real multi-environment setup, each stage points at a different environment, which means either a service connection per stage or the variable overridden at stage scope rather than release scope. Back to the Pipeline tab. You do not push every build straight to production. The typical pattern is 3 tiers: a test or development tier for the latest build, a UAT tier for stakeholder validation, and a production tier behind a manual approval gate. To get there from a single stage pipeline, hover over the Deploy to UDE stage. Click the menu icon and pick Clone. A duplicate appears. Click the new clone and rename it Deploy to UAT. Clone it again and rename to Deploy to Production. You now have 3 stages, each running the same 3 tasks. For the approval gate, click the small user icon on the left edge of the Deploy to Production stage. The pre-deployment conditions pane opens on the right. 2 flavors of approval exist. Pre-deployment pauses the release before the stage runs. Post-deployment pauses after. We are using pre-deployment. Enable the pre-deployment approvals toggle. In the Approvers field, add the user or group responsible for approving production deployments. For the demo, we have a single approver. In a real production setup, have at least 2. And tick the policy that says the user requesting a release should not approve it. That enforces segregation of duties. The person who clicked Create Release cannot also click Approve. Set the timeout to 30 days. If approval is not given within that window, the release is rejected automatically. A typical finance and operations unified package deployment takes over an hour. Anything that involves database synchronization or significant model changes can take longer. That is the release pipeline complete. In 2 episodes, we have gone from an empty Azure DevOps project to a fully automated build and deploy workflow for finance and operations on a unified developer environment. Every commit produces a deployable package. Every package flows through 3 environments. Production sits behind an approval gate. The whole chain is reproducible, audited, and lives in source control. If you have questions about finance and operations build and release pipelines, or you would like Veriland to help your team set theirs up, get in touch at veriland.co.uk. Thanks for watching.